Try to imagine the world in 1918. World War I is coming to an end. Millions of soldiers cross oceans, live in trenches, share cramped quarters. Humanity is already facing one of the greatest tragedies of its modern history. But something even worse is about to happen. A silent disease begins to spread. At first, it seems like just another common flu. Fever, cough, body aches, fatigue. Nothing the world hasn't faced before. But this was no ordinary flu. It was the beginning of the pandemic that would become known as the Spanish flu, one of the greatest public health catastrophes in human history. It is estimated that 1/3 of the world's population was infected. Between 50 and 100 million people died in just 2 years. To put that into perspective, the flu killed more people than the war itself. But how did it all begin? The exact place of origin is still debated by historians. Some point to military camps in the United States. Others suggest Europe or even Asia. What is known for certain is that the virus found the perfect environment to spread among military troops. Soldiers lived crowded together. They traveled on packed ships. They crossed continents, and they carried the virus with them. Within a few months, cases began to appear in different parts of the world. Curiously, the disease became known as the Spanish flu. Not because it originated in Spain, but because the country, neutral in the war, did not censor its press. While other nations hid the seriousness of the situation to avoid damaging public morale, Spanish newspapers freely reported the outbreaks, including the illness of the king himself. To the world, it seemed as though Spain was the epicenter of the crisis. But the truth was different. The virus was already everywhere. The pandemic occurred in 3 major waves. The first, in early 1918, was relatively mild. Many recovered. But the second wave, which began months later, was devastating. The virus mutated and became far more lethal. Hospitals were overwhelmed. There were shortages of doctors and nurses, as many were at war. There were not enough beds, not enough coffins. In some cities, bodies were piled in the streets. Entire families were infected within days. One of the most frightening characteristics of the 1918 flu was its speed. A person could wake up healthy and in less than 24 hours, be dead. Victims developed severe pneumonia. Some showed a bluish discoloration of the skin, caused by the lack of oxygen in the blood. It was as if they were drowning on dry land. And there was another intriguing detail. Unlike common flu strains, which mainly affect the elderly and children, the Spanish flu struck young, healthy adults with particular force, especially those between 20 and 40 years old, precisely the most active age group in society. Researchers believe this happened because their stronger immune systems overreacted to the virus, causing an inflammatory cytokine storm within their own body. The body, trying to defend itself, ended up destroying itself. As the virus spread, entire cities came to a halt. Schools closed. Churches suspended services. Theaters and public events were cancelled. In many places, wearing cloth masks became mandatory. Public campaigns warned: avoid crowds, wash your hands, cover your face when coughing. Sound familiar? Without vaccines, without antivirals, without antibiotics, to treat secondary infection, authorities had few tools at their disposal. Social distancing became the main strategy, but not everyone complied. In some cities, there was resistance to mask mandates. Protests arose against public health measures. Meanwhile, the death toll continued to rise. Grave diggers worked day and night. In certain places, mass graves were opened. Fear was constant. People avoided physical contact. Greetings disappeared. Homes displayed signs warning of infections inside. It was a time of total uncertainty. The pandemic spared no continent. In Europe, already devastated by war, the virus found populations weakened by hunger and poor living conditions. In Asia and Africa, the lack of medical infrastructure amplified the impact even further. In the Americas, major cities faced dramatic peaks in mortality. In Brazil, the virus arrived on ships coming from Europe. Within weeks, it spread through the main capitals. Public services were disrupted, workers fell ill, businesses closed, transportation was reduced. Even important political figures were victims of the disease. The flu made no distinction between rich and poor, although, as in almost every health crisis, the most vulnerable suffered the most. In 1919, the third wave of the flu was less intense than the second, but it still caused significant deaths. Gradually, the virus began to lose strength. Part of the population had already developed immunity. The virus itself may have mutated into a less lethal form. Without an official announcement, without a ceremony marking its end, the pandemic simply began to fade away. The world, exhausted, tried to move forward, but the scars remained. Millions of children were left orphaned, families were destroyed, economies had to reorganize, and perhaps most importantly, the Spanish flu forever changed the way humanity views pandemics. The tragedy of 1918 drove advances in public health. Governments began investing more in epidemiological surveillance. Disease reporting systems were Science started to better understand how viruses spread. Decades later, researchers identified the causative agent, an H1N1 influenza virus. The pandemic also left lessons about transparency, communication, and the importance of acting quickly. It showed that misinformation can cost lives. It showed that simple measures, such as avoiding crowds, can save thousands of people. And it revealed something fundamental. Humanity is vulnerable, but it is also capable of learning. The Spanish flu happened more than a century ago. At that time, there were no commercial mass flights, no internet, no social media, and yet the virus spread across the planet within months. Today, we live in an even more connected world. The story of 1918 is not just a distant chapter in history books. It is a reminder that pandemics are not impossible events. A reminder that science, cooperation, and collective responsibility are essential. And above all, a reminder of both the fragility and the strength of humanity. Millions did, but the world survived. And each generation carries with it the lessons of those who came before. The Spanish flu is not just the story of a virus. It is the story of how we confront the invisible, and how, even in the face of fear and loss, we move forward. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe, like, and share.